Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Rob Riches and today you're joining me here at the Powertec headquarters in Southern California. You know, over the years I get asked a lot of questions about muscle groups, exercises, workouts, so I figured today I'll compile my top 10 training techniques. So within this video, I'm gonna break down 10 exercises and really highlight a particular technique, how to optimize the muscle being trained and really correct your form to maximize its use and purpose. 10 exercises, let's jump right in with exercise number 1. This is all about the shoulders. It's a dumbbell lateral raise, ideal for hitting that middle deltoid. You know, the shoulders are comprised of 3 main deltoid heads and the middle one is really targeted during the dumbbell lateral raise. But the one thing that I found is, especially for beginners and even for people a little bit more advanced where they tend to let their technique slip over time, is they perform it like this. Their hands come up, might look like they're training their shoulders, but watch what happens when I change one particular thing. Now, my focus here isn't on where the hand is or even the plane across my body, it's where the elbow is. So look, at the moment, the elbow is kind of sunken down, kind of like a seagull wing, which doesn't work too well for putting a load onto that actual middle deltoid. So what I want to do is rotate that elbow out, kind of like a shelf. So you can see the top arm there is now externally rotated and parallel to the floor. And I want to keep that position fixed as I go into that lateral raise. So to really highlight it, let me do one arm with the proper technique. And I'll do my right arm, I'll try and do it incorrectly. So I'll do one at a time. Whether you catch yourself doing this or you see others do it, pay attention to where the hand and the elbow is. Compared to my left arm now, let's see. I mean, right away I can feel my left deltoid really targeted there. And you can see by correcting it, what I need to do is rotate my right elbow round. Therefore, both arms are now parallel with the floor. And I'm basically leading with the elbow rather than trying to raise my hand up. Now, the other thing when it comes to shoulders is some people like to have their hands and elbows kind of in front of their body and open out like this sort of hinge, or have the hands at the side of the body and raise them out. Look, I'm not saying that one technique is necessarily better than the other. This comes down to personal preference, but bear this in mind. If you perform the lateral raise with your arm fully extended without a bend in the elbow, there's a lot more stress going through your arm complex to raise that weight out. So if you do prefer this method, use a lighter weight or do a drop set from the bent elbow lateral raise, lower to a lighter weight, and then if you want, keep the arm more straight, put a lot more of that stress on that medial deltoid without using too much weight. Okay, so our second training tip here is relating to the chest, specifically the bench press, whether we're using dumbbells or a barbell. And what I'm gonna focus on here is, again, the arm angle, which I'll show without using any weights. Now, the purpose of doing this is to really engage the major and minor pectoral muscle in that pressing motion. But when we start to go heavy, we often get some little niggles here and there, particularly around our elbow area or that sort of hinge in the shoulder, whether it's a trapped nerve or just feels painful as we press out. Now, see if this looks familiar. As we press, we have our elbows pulled all the way up in line with our shoulder. Now, if you look from a square on position, you can see my elbow is pretty much in the same line as my shoulder. Therefore, I'm pressing up, putting a lot of stress and pressure through that shoulder unnecessarily. Watch what happens when I bring my elbows in and continue to push up. A lot less stress is now going through my shoulders, and I'm really engaging the pecs much more than if I've got the arm opened out. So, elbows all the way out, which just feels weird now to do. Sure, I can feel the stress through my chest. I also feel it through my elbows and shoulders. Now, what I want to do here is close my elbows up a little bit more In fact, by keeping my elbows a little bit more closed in, I feel my chest get that much more of a greater pump than with my elbow rotated all the way out. So give this a try, whether you're working with dumbbells or a barbell. Typically we have that wide overhand grip on the barbell and we keep our elbows spread, but by pulling them in, kind of closing that angle between our hip and elbow as far out as it can, we've got much more of a powerlifting type move than a traditional bodybuilding where we tend to have the elbows out. So change the elbow angle, push directly up, and take some of that stress off of the shoulder joint and the elbows. You're gonna feel it much more effectively in the chest and hopefully start to lessen any pain that you might have around the elbow and shoulder. Here we are, exercise number 3. And for this one, I'll be performing a barbell row. Now, I get that this in itself can be a tricky exercise, but it's also a great exercise for the midsection of the back. The other one being, of course, the lat pull down or a chin up. Now, really what I want to focus on here is the position of the elbows. Typically when people perform a barbell row, their back is often hunched. They tend to try and lift the bar up towards their shoulders, really not incorporating or engaging their back as much as they need to. So the first thing comes down to positioning. If we're stood upright with our shoulders back, first thing we want to do is bend the knees and push our hips back. So we're kind of in this half squat position as though we're just getting up from a chair. From here, we let our arms hang. You kind of see that the arm and the lower region of the leg, the shin, are within that same plane. So this allows me to row that bar up and back down, keep my arms at a right angle to the floor, completely vertical, allowing me to really squeeze and emphasize my back during the motion. So this is the first of our techniques. The second one is where my elbows are. So instead of lifting that bar up towards the upper region of my chest or shoulders, what I want to do is, see, I'm kind of pulling my elbows in, and I'm going to use my elbows to then drive up towards my waist. So I'm not lifting that bar up, I'm pulling my elbows back this way, sort of the same direction as my upper thighs. Even just me emphasizing that point and demonstrating it, I can really feel it in the lower midsection of the back. I want to show you one more time. This is my arms straight. What I'm focusing on here is the rotation of my elbow. So I'm putting it in like that. Arms out straight, rotate the elbows in, and then try and pull that bar. And then mimic that same motion with the bar, even without any weight, just to see how that difference feels with the back being worked. It's one of my favorite back exercises, especially when we add that little rotation in. Here we are, exercise number 4, another one for the back. And the reason I'm focusing on the back so much is just simply there's so many muscle groups and complexes that work within the back. So it's important that we address them because the back gets worked from so many different angles. This time we're going to do a seated row, which is kind of the same as doing the barbell row. I'm going to use a cable here, and the benefit here is really to get a full stretch. Now normally on a machine we'll tend to sit there, allow for the full extension of the arms, and then roll back, engaging the back, which is a great exercise. But what I want to put to you here is the tilt at the waist, get a full stretch and really let the lower region of the lats get stretched out, which don't typically get worked. So if your goal is to build that V-taper, that sort of V shape in the back, nice broad wide shoulders with the back tapering down to a tight waist, this exercise is really going to help you achieve that. So let me demonstrate. Now in this position, it's easy just to row, but I'm actually missing out quite a big portion of this movement, and that is to get that stretch here. So even though it's two movements, I'm making it into one. As I lower the weight, I'm flexing at that waist, bringing my whole upper body forwards, really feeling that stretch without allowing the weights to touch, which removes tension from the muscle. And then as I come back into the erect seated position, I start to row that bar in towards my abdomen. So when you tie them both together, it's a lean and stretch, sit upright and row. I'm not rowing in this position, and I'm not sitting all the way up and then turning it into a row. It's a smooth transition between that upright, when my arms are now in that full stretch parallel to the floor, and I start to row. So stretch, sit upright and row. Nice, smooth and fluid. Now, one more little tip here is to really stretch out. Underhand grip, one arm at a time. Whether your feet touch the floor or not, provide a little bit of support and just stretch. So if I do that from the front, so great stretch all the way down that lat. Now I'll do this after the first couple of warm-up sets. If anything, just to unstick all of those muscle fibers, really open them out, make them available so that they can work during the exercise. Exercise number 5, or rather training tip number 5. And once again, we're gonna stick with the back, but it's the last one within this series. Look, my point here is, how many of you perform hyperextensions for the lower back? I know I don't as often as I should, and there's a great reason to it. We focus a lot on our core, our abdominal area. Do crunches, sit-ups, pull-downs, leg raises, we all want those six-pack abs, but what about the opposing muscle group, the erector spinae, the lower back? Do we focus on that? Quite often, no. But it's a really key core muscle group, especially for postural and a lot of the back and leg movements that we might perform. So I've got two sort of versions of a hyperextension here, hyperextension and a reverse. And look, my technique or tip here rather is I include them during abdominals. So if I'm doing crunches, some oblique rotations, maybe some hanging knee raises or leg lifts, my fourth exercise within that circuit will be one of these. Therefore, I include them in a more frequent basis than just kind of throwing them in at the end of a back workout. So whether you have a machine similar to this one, most gyms do in some shape or form, the goal here is quite simply this. Extend, get that stretch, and then flex or contract, training, conditioning that muscle right here. So whether you want your arms crossed over your chest, up by your temple, or even holding a weight, come up, extend, stretch. Now, another little tip here is to focus on your breathing. I don't just mean, I mean really deep from the belly, that gut breathing. Fully exhale. As you exhale, you're contracting this sort of band of muscle around. That contracts, that actually helps elevate and lift your torso up. It's the same thing with abdominals. If you see my ab videos, I'm always exhaling, quite often excessively, because that allows me to really squeeze my core muscles. The same principle applies to your lower back. So this is why I like hyperextensions with abs, because I'm already training my core. So again, I'll really emphasize this point. I'm gonna fully exhale. As I do, I'm naturally contracting my core muscles. I'm gonna squeeze, hold that contraction, breathe in through my nose, stretch, exhale, and squeeze. Now, I get it that some gyms may not have a hyperextension machine, but quite often they all have a bench. So we can do the reverse of that. Slight incline, put our lower abdomen there, we're gonna hold on. And instead of bringing our body up, we're gonna bring our legs up. Still works the same muscle, and try this, holding a medicine ball or a Swiss stability ball between your legs and using that not just as weight, but also to keep that inward force on your legs. Great technique there to help strengthen, improve your lower back and posture, and throw it in with some abs to make sure you get it done 2, even 3 times a week with abs. All right, we're halfway through. Let's continue on, have a look at exercises 6 through to 10. Moving down to our arms, we're gonna focus on the biceps here. This is a great technique to really, I guess, develop more the inner bicep here, the short head. So let me backtrack. When it comes to the biceps, bi, meaning 2, there's 2 heads of the bicep muscle. We have the long head and the short head. Now the long head comes down from here, hence its name, long head, and it's what you see sort of here. It's the long head of the bicep. The short head, if you can see the split there, it's this thicker sort of under portion of the bicep. Now it's this muscle that I find gives it that bulbous effect. It's round kind of size, it's mass. And one way to do this, quite simply, is with an incline bench. Now the long head typically gets worked when the elbows are at the side of the body, so dumbbell curls, barbell curl, any of your traditional bicep-based exercise. The short head really gets targeted when our elbow comes in front of our body or supported. So preacher curl and other exercises like that. And we're gonna mimic that using an incline bench. So I've got a dumbbell here. I'm gonna set the bench up to a near vertical. What I'm gonna do is rest the back of my arm, the tricep flush against the pad. I want my wrist, elbow, and shoulder all in that same alignment. So now, if I show with my left hand, see that bicep there, the short head working. As I'll open out and extend the arm, and then flex and contract it back up. Now, I'm sure you've done a version of this exercise before, whether on a bench or on a machine, but the real technique here, or the addition, the change that I want to show you, is another slight rotation. And it really is a slight rotation. So look, as I curl that weight up, I'm gonna very gently rotate my wrist outwards, no more than 15 degrees. And if you see here, it just pulls in a little bit more on that short head. There. So the goal here is not to go too heavy, but rather chase that burn. 12, 15 reps. Add that slight rotation in at the top. You can see there with that conditioning. If I rotate just there, it's a little one, but it's enough. And when you're looking for every progression, every cheat code, if you like, how to progress, little things like this can really help you take it to that next level. All right, exercise number 6. And you know what? Whilst we're here, let's jump right into number 7, which for the triceps, the back of the arm. And this is great to be able to pair, superset, perform one immediately followed by the other. Now for this one, with the tricep, it works opposed to the bicep. So the tricep is the opposing muscle group to the bicep. So when the bicep works by contracting like that, we're lengthening the bicep, which means as we lengthen the bicep, the tricep is then being contracted. So great exercise for this. And another one to really isolate a particular head is to do this cross extension. So it allows me to support my arm there, just gently holding my free hand, stretching out that tricep there. And then by holding my arm in place, I can really focus on squeezing, contracting, and engaging that tricep head like this. Of course, there's some different angles I can go through. But I find crossbody allows me to really hit the main tricep head, which is great for giving us that shape and actually contributing to a large portion of the mass of the arm. Okay, that's shoulders, back, a few back, chest, biceps, triceps. Let's move on now, have a look at the legs and the abs. Exercises 8, 9, and 10. Training tip number 8, and for this one, we'll be taking a look at the barbell squat. Now, the main thing about the squat is it's all about technique. So let me break down 2 things for you. Typically when I see people perform a barbell squat, they just sort of concertina their body, which means they start up here, and they kind of end down here. Now, you can see right away that that's a lot of pressure and stress on my knees, certainly if I've got some weight over here. Then I tend to arch over, and you sort of find yourself doing this. If that's you, or you know people who squat like that, pay attention to how we're about to correct that. Now, we're gonna go from this to this. And it all comes down to a few simple changes in the way that you kind of squat down. The first, I like to think of it as the hips. Now, instead of just going straight down, we're gonna push them back. And the way I think about it is, imagine you're caught out in the woods and you need to go number 2. You're gonna try and squat as far back as you can, and that's essentially the movement that you want to mimic here. So we're going to squat in the woods like that, but instead of hunching over like this, we're going to keep our chest up and our shoulders back, because that's where we have the bar. So you can see my knees are no longer pushing over my toes. I'm not just concertinaing my body down, I'm now pushing my hips back, flexing at the knees, but keeping my shoulder and my chest upright. Even to the point where I could perform it up against a pole, still squat back, and my knee isn't pushing against the pole. Give that a try. If you can find a doorway or a wall, stand as close to it as you can. A little bit tricky here, but imagine this were a wall and try and squat down. If your knee is pushing against the wall, typically it means that you're not quite there with the technique. But with this one, I can go down, my knee isn't pushing forwards, which means all of the work is now kept in the upper region of my leg. Let me give you an example. So we have our barbell weight here. I'll show you the incorrect way first. So I'll turn slightly sideways out here. Now, if I'm an absolute complete beginner, I've never done a squat before, I might attempt it like this. Oh, that feels terrible. Oh, that's hard even just to do that, but I see a lot of people do that. Now, one more time. We're just gonna squash our body down. Oh, there's a lot of stress on the knees. Then I'm gonna arch my back to try and stand up. No wonder people don't like doing the squat for the first time. Now, watch this. Hips go back, knees are soft, my chest is upright. All of that movement just comes around my hips. It's actually much easier to move that weight now. Just gonna breathe in, contract the abs. Exhale as I push back up. And then we'll take the bar back and lock it in. Now there is a second part to this movement that I want to bring to your attention, and that is where my feet are as I push up, I'm not simply just trying to push that bar back up. I'm imagining as though I can push through the floor. So when I'm in this position, imagine as though I'm stood in sand and I'm gonna push my feet down into the sand. That's that same motion. So at the bottom, my hips are back, my knees aren't protruding over my toes. I'm gonna drive my feet hard into the floor as though I'm pushing the floor away from me. And that's the second part to the squat. Of course, you can change your foot position, the width, slight angle of the toes. Those are all nuances at which you can play into this movement. But the key fundamental parts of this, taking the hips back, keeping the knees soft, shoulders back, and when you drive that bar up, imagine as though you're pushing your legs through the floor. Here we are, exercise number 9. And for this one, we'll be taking a look at the leg press. Now, what I want to bring to your attention here is a couple of things. Our foot position based on the height of the plate, as well as the width and the angle. Now, what this does is really focus on whether the quadriceps or the hamstrings are really doing most of the work. So by keeping our feet up at the top here, demonstrate, all the way up here, if I lower the foot plate down, keep my feet high, you can see my toes are actually just off the end of the foot plate here. My hamstrings are really getting a good workout here. They're really getting stretched and kind of preloaded to drive that weight back up. So even on leg days where your focus might be on the back of the leg, the hamstring, try giving the leg press a go with a high foot position. And of course, you can change the feet slightly outwards. Just make sure that the ball of the foot is still on the foot plate and you're not sort of all the way up here, certainly where the foot can slip off. A little bit of the toes at the top is okay though. So wide and high, hamstrings are being worked, especially keeping that wide position. And then more of a center and certainly lower down. That teardrop and the quads get worked a lot. Now, it's a much steeper angle, so I don't want to go as heavy or even as deep. But if I change my foot position around, what I'm really focusing on here is the vastus medialis, the teardrop section just above the knee. So you can see how we can take one movement, create multiple sets out of it, and really shift the emphasis on which muscles in the leg are really being worked here. Now, there's one other thing that I can do here. Right at the end, so I haven't got too much weight on, I'll bring my feet all the way down to the bottom. I'm gonna finish off just on a seated calf press. Here we're working the gastrocnemius, and if we actually bend the knee a bit, that's the soleus muscle. So right there we're working our two major calf muscles, which I really like to do at the end of a couple of sets on legs. So there you have it. High and wide hits the hamstrings, mid and low really works the top of the legs, the quads, and at the end throw a little burn set in. Bring the ball of the foot down to the bottom of the foot plate. You don't need to lock the knees out exactly. You can keep them soft just as long as you're getting that full extension by pushing the toes as far away from you and then allowing the heel to go beyond that toe line. Great exercise for the lower region of the legs. All right, we've got one more left, and for that, let's go take a look at abs. Here we are with our final training tip of the video, and for this one, we're gonna focus on the abdominals. Now, this one happens to be probably my favorite abdominal training movement. And for this, we're gonna do a high cable crunch. What I mean by this is we're gonna use the cable pulley to provide the leverage and the resistance on the crunch. Now, when I say a crunch, I'm not talking about a sit-up like you would do on the floor. Really what I'm talking about is just crunching the abdominals down, and it's pretty much just that movement. I'm gonna exhale. You can see I'm just kind of closing that half moon, that cashew shape, bringing my shoulders down. Think of a hurl. You know, if you're feeling a little bit iffy in the stomach, you feel like you might be sick, what happens? You go, it's that same movement. You crunch over, the abdominals are contracted. Same kind of movement if you're laughing really hard and you're you contract the abs. It's not a big movement, certainly not all the way down here. So by using the cable system, I've got some weights at the end. It's a nice smooth, fluid motion there. I can get down into this bent position. My arms are fixed at that angle. So what I'm not doing is this. I'm not moving my arms to pull the weight. I'm gonna keep my arms fixed. I'm gonna contract the abs, exhale. And as I do, just crunch. Just that movement. So breathe in, lengthen the abs. Exhale, contract. You certainly don't need to go all the way to the floor for it to be effective. It's literally that movement. And there we have it, guys. 10 pretty simple, but nonetheless effective training techniques to add into your workout. And on that note, I'll leave you with this. We all have different bodies, we all have different training goals, needs, purposes. So take what you want from my videos, my channel, other people that you follow on social media, YouTube, Instagram, and build up your own repertoire, your own library, database, if you like, of movements, exercises, training techniques, and tips. Find what works best for you. Find what you enjoy that you can actually maintain and have some consistency with, and use that as your foundation to build upon. But I do ask one thing from you, and that is pay it forwards. Whatever you find works for you, put it back out there. Show the next generation, the older generation, the younger generation. Put it out there in a way that someone else can learn from. Let's all teach others, especially the newcomers, how to do things effective rather than having them kind of go through all of the different stages and eventually get to the same spot. So on that note, appreciate you guys watching. If you like it, leave a comment, subscribe. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Wherever you find social media, you'll find me on there. And let's keep this going. In the gym here at Powertec, in the kitchen, out on location. It's a lifestyle. Doesn't always have to be perfect, but it needs to be a conscious decision to try and make that next step forward. All right, guys, I'll see you then. Take care.